Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, Tyler Tachman of the Des Moines Register, coming at you earlier than usual on this Tuesday as my guy Tyler and our buddy Dargan Southern, they are heading to Chicago here very shortly. Probably going to hit the DeKalb Oasis on the way, right? To hit Big Ten basketball media days. But we're not going to talk about basketball today, I don't think. Maybe we will. Maybe Tyler will surprise us here with some hot basketball takes. But it's Iowa, Ohio State week, Tyler. We wanted to get you guys a pod here before you guys scooted out of town.
Yeah. It's I can't make any promises that there won't be any basketball talk, but I guess we can start with football. Well, I guess let's start off with basketball.
Yeah,
I'll just throw it in real
While
quick.
people are joining, give us a basketball take here.
No, Peyton Sandford preseason All Big Ten as announced on Tuesday, and I don't think that's much of a surprise, but it just further cements that he is expected to be one of the best players in the Big Ten entering the season.
Yeah, I know the official media poll comes out tomorrow. We've seen the results, but I guess without spoiling too much, I was surprised to see how much love Peyton Sandford had from across the voting, all the voters in the 18 Big Ten teams. I mean, it's a big deal that he came back.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the biggest Stego decisions in the entire draft, not just the Big Ten. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk some football.
People don't want to hear about that, do they?
Oh
Football?
Yeah, they do. Of course.
Football.
Yeah. Oh yeah, football. Yeah.
No.
So we had a week off of player interviews. Obviously, we talked to you guys last week about Tim Lester, LeVar Woods, Phil Parker. Very interesting availability. But now we get into another game week, and Tyler, I mean, one of the topics we want to get to is kind of, what's it going to take to beat Ohio State? We'll probably hit that more on the Hawk Central show tomorrow. But really, our first topic, I think, should center around bye week developments. And I think probably one of the most profound statements I've heard from Kirk Ferentz in a while was I don't have the exact quote in front of me because they don't even have the transcript up yet. But we're about as healthy as we've ever been. Is basically what Kirk Ferentz said. They get Le'Shawn Williams back this week, Seth Anderson back this week. The injury list is incredibly short, Tyler. And I mean, if you're going to beat Ohio State, that's a pretty good, place to start, I would say.
And you think about where Iowa was at this time last season, Luke Lachey was already in what ended up being a season-ending injury. The fifth game of the season was where Cade McNamara got, his ACL hurt against Michigan State. So maybe Iowa is getting some good luck from all the bad injury luck it had last season. But a lot of those key guys, I mean, even the offensive line, it seems like has been able to stay healthy. And defensively, I mean, a lot of the key guys, you go into the season saying Iowa just can't afford these guys to get hurt. They have stayed healthy. So, like you said, if Iowa has any chance to go into Columbus, and at this point it seems very slim, not impossible, but very slim, but you want to have as many guys as possible available. And it seems like, not just at the bye week helped with a couple guys, it seemed like, but even before then, Iowa was just in really good shape from a health standpoint.
Yeah, I saw Hawkeye Game Film retweeted this. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this Parker Fleming. He does he's at Stats of War on Twitter. Does all these advanced stats previews, etc. They're really good. It's interesting. Gives you some good background of the strengths and weaknesses of each team. They've got Ohio State as an 89.47% chance of winning, which probably is about what we would expect, right? A 90% chance Ohio State wins. But again, there's analytically a 10% chance, a 1 out of 10 prospect here, Tyler, that the Hawkeyes do win this game. So I don't think we can totally discount that as a possibility. That's why they're going to Columbus. They're not going there to try to keep it close. But that said, keeping it close would be, from the outside, something we would like to see from this Iowa football team, given kind of where they were last year. You asked Kirk about that today. I thought he gave an interesting answer.
Yeah, I mean, and he did flip it and say a little bit that, well, it was impressive that Iowa won 10 games last season. And I do think that's a fair argument that with everything that Iowa had to deal with, that winning 10 games was a pretty impressive feat. But at the same time, Iowa won the game against Penn State at Kinnick Stadium in 2021. Since then, haven't beaten what you look at the traditional powers of the Big Ten in Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State. And the margin of victory has been very wide, or the margin of loss for Iowa. So there is a clear gap there recently of Iowa not only losing those games, but not really even being that very competitive. So um, you would like to, at minimum, see Iowa stay in the game. I know that there's some fans that don't care for moral victories regardless, but I think this is an opportunity to at least start changing the narrative. You're not going to, even if Iowa beats Ohio State, Iowa isn't all of a sudden going to be seen as, hey, they're one of the giants of the Big Ten. They're in that very top upper echelon of this new expanded Big Ten. But Iowa's going to have more of these matchups coming up. I mean, next season, Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan. I believe the following season you get Michigan and Ohio State. So there's going to be these premier matchups. There's going to be a fair amount of them moving forward. So this is an early indication of whether Iowa even has a chance of kind of holding their own in these types of matchups coming up.
Yeah, this point spread right now is around 20. That analytics post I referenced projected like a 33 to 16 and a half type of final score in this game on Saturday. So, yeah, the point spread's pretty consistent with what the analytics project. So it'll be interesting to see how Iowa handles it. Like, even just go down the line, their last 4 games against the real big teams: 54-10 at Ohio State, 31-0 at Penn State, 26-0 to Michigan in the Big Ten title game, and 35-0 to Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl. So yeah, not great. So what will it take, Tyler? Obviously, it's going to start with quarterback play, and that was another guy that we both talked to today, Cade McNamara. What did he have to say? You were with him a little bit longer than I was. What did he have to say about facing a team that he has defeated before as the Michigan quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like I think the general consensus, not just for Cade, but the players in general, were kind of embracing that underdog kind of mentality. And because it's not a surprise that it's like that I was not favored to win this game. Like, that's something that just kind of pretty much everybody knows. And it's not something that I was necessarily running away from. To me, it seems similar to the Penn State game last season and the Michigan game. Both of those going in, like I was going to have to play a near perfect game to win. And in both of those games, Iowa didn't really get close to playing perfect games, and it showed in the outcome. So to me, it feels similar in that sense that going in that Iowa's going to have to there's going to have a lot of things go right and very little go wrong. And they're going to have to play their best. They still haven't put together a full game this season. There was progress against Minnesota where it was, you felt like maybe 3 good quarters to 1 poor quarter versus the first 2 games where it was pretty much split 50-50. But I think, I was going to have to, barring a total collapse from Ohio State. And look, in Ohio State, they don't have Justin Fields or CJ Stroud back there at quarterback this season. Will Howard is good, but the pieces around him are really good as well. When you talk about Ibuka at wide receiver, the 2-headed monster at running back with Quinshaw Junkins and Trevion Henderson. So they have the pieces and the defense around him, but they don't have like that kind of game-breaking quarterback that they've had in the past.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the matchups, I think, on tomorrow's Hawk Central radio show, but that's one where I do feel like I definitely am not saying Iowa has a quarterback advantage. No, I'm not saying that at all. But I think the defense, has a better chance against Will Howard than it did against CJ Stroud ultimately. And Iowa for a half 2 years ago did a pretty good job against CJ Stroud. It's just, when your offense turns it over 6 times like they did in the 54-10 loss, it's going to catch up with you eventually. I think Ohio State only scored on a touchdown on one of its first 10 drives 2 years ago against Iowa's defense. So the key is for the offense to actually stay on the field a lot. And that was another line of questioning that sort of came up a lot today. So Ferentz is also shooting for number 200 this week in Ohio State. And I asked him a very poorly worded question today.
Looks like Chad just muted. The mic is undone. And
Yeah,
there
my mic.
it's got a mind of its own.
There we go.
All
Okay.
right.
I asked Kirk, "Hey, would you like to win at Ohio State sometime?" Like, which was a terrible way to ask the question. It was kind of fun, but he actually turned into a great answer. He's like, "Well, yeah, I would." And then he kind of went into just how hard it is, but also they have had shots. 2009, they went to overtime over there with the Big Ten regular season championship on the line. That was with James Vandenberg making his first career start at quarterback. And then 2013, we talked about that one a little bit more in depth because Iowa hung and hung and hung in that game. And that's kind of the early image I feel about this game is I feel like Iowa can hang for a while, but can it go start to finish and be absolutely perfect? I'm thinking back to the Michigan game last year, actually, in the Big Ten championship. Like the defense played the game you would want them to have for your team to have a chance. But the huge punt return and offensive, inefficiency and just complete woes, where you're giving the only 2 touchdown drives Michigan had were less than 10 yards in that game, and they won the national title. So I guess in that sense, that's the type of defensive performance you got to have, but you need to bring the offense and special teams along to get to the point where you can be competitive. And it sounded like it was from what I heard from Cade and my, conversation with him over there, like it felt like the offense, what are they going to say? But felt like the offense had a really important week last week during the bye week, of improvement with the passing game.
And Jay Higgins kind of said, like, if you don't want to play against NFL level guys in college, then you're not going to play in the NFL. So, like, I thought he said something to that effect. Like, that was a pretty good way of putting it. But no, right now, the way Iowa exists in the Big Ten, by my view, is that they're much better than your run of the mill average program. They're incredibly consistent under Kirk Ferentz, but they're not there at the level of Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, USC, Oregon. And that's a gap that I'm just interested to see over not just, on Saturday, but how does that unfold as we continue to move forward in the Kirk Ferentz era and beyond? Is Iowa, to me, that's one of the main kind of tensions of the program is like, can Iowa close that gap and become an elite program? Because they have a lot of things going for it. They have a really good defense. They have great resources, a passionate fan base. It seems like the missing piece really the last few seasons has been offense. If maybe, it was I believe it was against ranked opponents last season, Iowa was outscored 92-0. And you look at 92-0, it's like, wow, that's just drastic. It doesn't even seem like they're close. But maybe if the offense, isn't hurting the defense as much, maybe if you just get the offense into place, maybe things can fall into place and that gap isn't as wide as it seems. Maybe it is, but yeah, like I said, I don't know if I have the schedule put up now. So next season they play Penn State, Oregon, and USC. So those are 3 premier type matchups. And then in 2026, they get Ohio State and Michigan. So there's going to continue being these litmus tests of, measuring up where Iowa stands against these programs. And you have to watch out because with the new programs coming in, I was also at risk of kind of falling down that totem pole a little bit. If you continually show you can't compete against those top teams, you kind of fall down in the hierarchy of the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I guess we kind of just blended our first topic here into the second, but I think those are all great points. And yeah, I think from the outside, obviously the Hawkeyes want to win the game. Every one of you listening to this wants to win the game, but I think a good sign of progress, Tyler, would be, being competitive, especially offensively, because Ohio State's defense is actually really good. Like you think about all the weapons they have on offense, running back position, the receivers, they have a crazy freshman receiver who's just incredible. Get Quinshawn Judkins, who's a tremendous running back, and that doesn't even count Travion Henderson at running back. So just loaded on offense, but their defense might be just as good. And so, can can Iowa move the ball on the ground? And Caleb Johnson was another guy we talked to today. Let's talk about some of these Ohio guys going back home. Okay, the two in particular. Maybe we can even weave Caleb Brown in there potentially, but that would be Caleb Johnson and Luke Lachey, right? I mean, two Ohio natives who are basically your two best offensive players. It sure seemed like Caleb Johnson. I know you didn't get a chance to talk to Caleb, right? I did. Okay, he was only there for like 5 minutes, but he had a lot to say in those 5 minutes. So I'll kind of recap that here. But he was basically like, he grew up kind of near the Cincinnati area, like Hamilton, Ohio, and he basically said like where he's from, like you either hate Ohio State or you love Ohio State. He didn't say he hated Ohio State, but he was always one of those guys wired to like want to beat the big team, like beat Ohio State. And so he said, even if they offered, I wasn't going to go there. I want to beat them, basically. So it's kind of an interesting mentality. And he goes into this game with a major spotlight, Tyler. He's still the Big Ten's leading rusher. He's still number 2 in the country in rushing after everyone's caught up in games. And so, man, what a situation for Caleb here. Let's talk about him, who had 10 carries for, I think, or 11 carries for 28 yards in this meeting 2 years ago.
Well, the good news about where Iowa stands going into this game versus where they were 3 games ago, or the 3 ranked matchups a year ago, is that they didn't have the Caleb Johnson that they have now. Like, that's to have. I was bringing in one of the nation's best running backs and legitimate kind of in at least the conversation for the Heisman at this point in the season. And that's just something that Iowa hasn't had when its offense has really been sputtering. So that's good news. That's good news that Iowa has that type of weapon. Now, I think if Iowa has a chance to win this game, I think Cade McNamara has to play his best game in his career at Iowa. I think that's what it's going to take. We've kind of heard about, or we've talked about how defenses are going to stack boxes to try to stop Caleb Johnson. Tim Lester kind of countered that by saying offensively, we stack our box as well. So it maybe is actually a little bit more evened out than the I might initially see. But I think they're going to have to throw the ball. I just don't think Caleb Johnson can just run all over Ohio State like he did against Minnesota or against Illinois State. And maybe I'm wrong, because I didn't think he would be able to run crazy like that against Minnesota, and he did. So maybe he'll surprise me again, but because of how good Ohio State's defense is, I think he can have a good game, maybe 80, 90 yards, but I just don't think it will be enough to carry Iowa to win, basically like he did in the Minnesota game. So I think the passing game, it has to show something it hasn't, against Iowa State and against Minnesota. I think for all we've talked about the passing game, like Cade hit that really nice kind of longer pass to Jacob Gill in against Illinois State for a touchdown. So like it's possible. It like we've seen it happen. Now it hasn't happened on a consistent basis, but I just think I think Cade simply is going to have his best game in years and his best at Iowa for Iowa to have a chance of winning.
Yeah, no question. I think that's I think that's what people want to see. I mean, you brought in Cade McNamara to win games like this. I know it's a long shot, but he has experience of beating Ohio State, like you said, and maybe Caleb Brown can be a guy. I mean, he has 1 catch this year. He played 1 snap last game, and can he? I mean, he's definitely has the athleticism, the talent. You're going to need guys that can make plays. I just wonder. I'm curious to see how much Caleb Brown is infused into this game plan against his former team. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't had a huge role, and he didn't even play in the first game because of that arrest in the offseason. But I mean, the other guy I really would like to see get going for Iowa's offense is Luke Lachey, and you referenced him briefly. He has the ties to Ohio State, but he's a guy I just feel like, especially in the red zone, that can be such a weapon in helping Cade McNamara. But we haven't seen those two connect a lot so far this season. But I think the receivers are there. There was a few plays that they didn't make against Minnesota, but I feel like overall the receiving group is in a better place than it was at this point last season with Reese Vanderzee and Jacob Gill, and then some of the younger guys like Jarrett Bowie and Dayton Howard. But from a receiving standpoint, I think Lachey is the one that I really look to as he can kind of he can really help unlock that passing game. And doesn't even need to be deep shots, but maybe more intermediate, because really all we've seen Cade McNamara do is mostly the shorter ball. So I think that getting the kind of, it doesn't need to be a 40-yard, 50-yard bomb every time, but if you can get some more 15, sprinkle some 15, 20 yarders in there, that helps, that'll help the running game as well.
Yeah, I talked to Luke Lachey's parents last night. Obviously, as you probably all know, Jim, his father is the radio color analyst for Ohio State games. He's done that for 28 years. Former Buckeyes offensive lineman, former first-round NFL draft pick, played for the Washington football team for a long time in the pros. And yeah, Luke played there a couple years ago. He talked today about he was really nervous going into that game, felt a lot of pressure going into that game 2 years ago. He had one catch for 6 yards. I think it was a big deal for him to do that as a kid who grew up throwing footballs outside the stadium and, grew up Buckeyes fans, grew up storming the field, in Ohio Stadium. But now he says, now he's a co-captain. Now he's said he doesn't feel that pressure anymore. It's just another game to him. But he is, for what it's worth, taking it as a really special experience. And to your point, Tyler, 12 catches for 97 yards. I mean, you would not think coming into the season that he'd be averaging 24 yards receiving per game. I mean, I would think it would be closer to like 60 per game, which is, he averaged 65 in his 2 games last year before he got hurt. So yeah, I think this is a major, major opportunity for Luke Lachey to kind of have a breakout on this amazingly huge stage. His parents said that the BTN Journey is doing a piece on it's done, obviously, but it's going to air later this week. So Lachey will be a major storyline in this game. And I will probably tune into the Ohio State radio broadcast just a little bit to hear what Jimmy Lachey is saying. I would love to hear the call if Luke scores a touchdown in this game, right? The Ohio State call, because his dad told me, like, he gets asked all the time, like, what will I do if Luke scores a touchdown against the team that I'm, I call games for? And he said, they know I'm a parent first, and, he'll be smiling if Luke scores a touchdown on Saturday.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the emotions that, like, of just the clashing of worlds that would kind of be unfolding there. But I don't think it's unrealistic at all. I think the baseline for this game, for if you're an Iowa fan, should be to compete. Like, if Iowa is the program that it wants to be, and that's one that is competing for Big Ten championships, that now with the expanded playoff can make the college football playoff, the baseline needs to be to at least stay competitive. And really, Iowa wasn't that way last season against Tennessee and Michigan and Penn State. Like, there was the gap was very clear, but I just feel like Iowa needs to prove that it at least belongs on the same field as Ohio State. And again, I don't think that they're going to win the game. They're going to have a lot of things go right. But like, if you can keep the game close going into the fourth quarter, I feel like I don't want to call it a statement, but it's a step in the right direction. It's a step that you belong on the field with them. And so I don't, to me, like I said, if Iowa football is supposed to be at that standard where it can hold its own and at some points win these types of games. So they need to show what they have in the last few seasons.
So it was a great list of players today. Let's finish, Tyler, today by talking about 4 of these players that showed up. I'll do 2 because I talked to them a little bit more. You talked to another 2 guys that are in the spotlight this weekend. And I'll start with Xavier Wampa. That's a guy that was recruited by Ohio State. I was impressed with how candid he was about the play against Jalen Noel, about time sharing with Cohen Entringer. This is the first time we've talked to him, right? Since then, I'm pretty sure. So We've talked to Cohen, but not Xavier. And he's kind of in a timeshare right now at strong safety. And he was recruited by Ohio State heavily. In fact, he said that Ohio State was his number 2 choice when he ultimately picked the Hawkeyes. And this is the type of game, Tyler, and I'll have a little bit more written about Xavier's thing here tomorrow morning. But this is the type of game where you need your 5-star recruit to maybe make one of those big plays in the secondary. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting for Xavier, to kind of have one of those splash plays. He hasn't an interception since the opener last year. And so, could this be the week where, hey, maybe he turns the page to another level this week against Ohio State. Obviously that's, just like Jay Higgins said, if you want to be in the NFL someday, you got to, perform against these guys. And so I'll be watching him. I'll be watching number 1 for the Hawkeyes on defense on Saturday. Another defensive player you talked to today, Tyler, that I'd love to hear your perspective on is Deshaun Lee, a cornerback who's, talk about a spotlight here. Ohio State's going to have the best receivers they're going to face all year.
Yeah, and I just feel like his trajectory is just kind of interesting because he started at the beginning of last season and then finished the end of last season back in the starting lineup. With the first little bit was when Jamari Harris was suspended. The last little bit was when Cooper DeJean got hurt. And you expected him maybe to be the front runner to get that starting job heading into this season. Instead, TJ Hall wins it out. He starts the first 3 games. And then Deshaun Lee gets the start against Minnesota. So I feel like, I don't know, it's just an interesting kind of trajectory and a secondary that has been in the spotlight, not necessarily for the right reasons, because right now that's probably the position group on defense that has shown the most flaws up to this point in the season. So Kirk Ferentz said he thinks Deshaun Lee is starting against Ohio. He didn't definitively say yes he's starting, but
yeah,
Deshaun Lee also said he was getting 1 reps. So it seems like he might be in line. Deshaun Lee just seems like steady, I guess is maybe the way to put him. Like he seems like there haven't been as many, with TJ Hall as like glaringly like kind of big plays that have been around, but he's Jamar, but I think it's worth mentioning also that how good Jamari Harris has been playing. And for a guy that decided to come back, a veteran, he's been playing at the level you'd want a guy, his age and with his experience to be playing at.
Yeah, Deshaun just seems fearless and, doesn't have the measurables maybe, but seems like a really solid player. So I bet he's probably going to be the one out there with TJ Hall, obviously on call as needed. Another player I wanted to talk about is Connor Colby. He came today. Folks will remember that Connor's a smart guy. He kind of knew where I was going with this line of questioning. I was asking him about the 2022 game. That was the last time he started for Iowa at tackle. So they kind of ended the tackle experiment that day with Connor Colby. He has been much better at guard since. And really, I feel like his growth, Tyler, from that Ohio State game 2 years ago, where it just was not a good day. It wasn't a good day for anybody, okay? But it was not a good day for Connor Colby. Basically, it was no longer going to play tackle after that game. Moved to guard, and his growth is indicative of the entire offensive line in the 2 years since. And so I think that that's a really important thing to recognize is this is not the same offensive line they had in that 54-10 game. You feel way, way better about it. Now, Ohio State has an amazing defensive line, so it's going to be a major challenge. And, Connor said basically, it's no matter how good the other team is, like it's all about, how you perform. And, if they're getting off the ball exactly how they're supposed to, I feel like there is confidence that they could break off some Caleb Johnson runs in this game. That's obviously going to be a major story in this game. Can they do that 2, 3, 4 times in this game where Caleb's, topping 100 yards? Suddenly you got some momentum. And then, Tyler, that gets into the last guy I wanted to talk about, which you talked to today, which would be Drew Stevens, because what a weapon he could be in a game like this. He's perfect on kicks this year. Ferentz was raving about his 46-yarder against Minnesota. He's perfect on everything. What did he have to say today about, kind of where he's at? I thought it was interesting that Kirk kind of paralleled he and Caleb Johnson's growth. Like, here's, true juniors kind of taking their game to another level this year. And honestly, I mean, if Drew Stevens could knock through 4 field goals of 40 plus, which I'm not discounting, like if they could just get into that range where they're at the 30-yard line of Ohio State and cash in 3 points out of it, that's a huge way to keep this one close.
Yeah, so I just kind of asked him, like, how would you evaluate what you've done through 4 games this season? And he was actually like, I mean, he admitted that it had gotten off to a good start, but he was like very nitpicky about his kicks, saying like some of them, like they were too low, or, like he was very, it seemed like kind of very analytical on what he had done. And so I thought, and because he also referenced like he got off to a good start last season, and the tail end of last season didn't finish the way that, it didn't finish the way that he wanted. But I think him realizing that, just because he had a good first 4 games doesn't mean the rest of the season is going to go that way. So just staying focused and continuing to push himself. And he also, he confirmed with what LeVar Woods mentioned last week, was that he is reading. He said he's not reading a lot, but LeVar Woods mentioned that he is reading, just, I guess, speaking to his maturity. And he's been, I mean, we haven't seen him in the type of, high pressure Northwestern game type of situation like he did last season, where he hit the game winner. But I mean, he continues, at least through 4 games, to be really steady and a real weapon for Iowa. And then you feel good that if he does get in that type of situation near the end of a game, or, in a high pressure situation, that he's going to be able to deliver.
Good stuff, Tyler. Let's let you hit the road. You go cover some basketball. I'll keep plugging away on football. We get offensive line coach George Barnett tomorrow on the Zoom, so looking forward to reporting back from that. And we'll have our Hawk Central radio show for you about 24 to 28 hours from now with me and Tyler. So busy week as our basketball and football seasons begin to converge. So thanks, Tyler. Safe travels.
Thank you.
All right, and thanks for everyone joining us. Talk to you next time here on